October 3rd, 1893. At around 10 o'clock that night, fire broke out in the center of Turlock's business district. Within minutes, flames were racing in both directions through a block of wooden buildings. There was no fire department, no engine company, no hydrants. Only buckets, wet sacks, and townspeople trying to save what they could. Men stood in the street and watched the heart of their town burn. Stores, saloons, shops, livelihoods. Gone in a single night. And before Turlock could recover, fire would strike again. Welcome to Turlock Unburied. Tonight, the story of two fires that nearly erased Turlock in the 1890s, and the people left standing in the ashes afterward. Because this isn't just the story of burned buildings. It's the story of ruin, pride, despair, and how a dying little railroad town somehow found new life. Later in the episode, the host of Still Unexplained joins us for a personal story about working side by side with a man who would later shock California. In the early 1890s, Turlock was still a young frontier town. Front Street was lined with wooden false front buildings, general stores, butcher shops, saloons, boarding houses, and warehouses serving farmers and railroad traffic. Then came the fire. It started in the center of the block, and once it caught, the flames moved fast. Residents fought desperately with water buckets and soaked sacks, trying to save nearby buildings including the Davis Warehouse and Turlock Hotel. One large saloon on the corner of Front and East Main burned the longest, holding on until after midnight. When it was all over, much of Turlock's business center was gone. Losses were estimated at $50,000, a crushing blow for a town this size. As the smoke still drifted over Front Street, townspeople looked for someone to blame. They found a shoemaker named Julius Lebkren. Some papers mocked him as the crazy shoemaker, claiming he cooked on an oil stove and had nearly set his shop ablaze multiple times. But later recollections said the fire actually began behind Pat McGraw's saloon. Shoemaker Lebkren insisted his stove had been cold for 2 days and that he was already in bed when the fire started. In the ashes of a disaster, rumor often spreads faster than flames. Among the hardest hit were Max and Sam Strauss, whose general merchandise business suffered some of the largest losses. The next morning they walked through the smoking remains of their store. Later family history described the scene. Walking through the smoldering timbers of their store the next day was a harrowing experience. You could hear Max Strauss swearing bitterly, while Sam Strauss kept his voice low and controlled. He was in a rage. Years of hard work had vanished overnight. The account continued. The brothers struggled emotionally with the magnitude of the event, and for a week or two they argued about what to do. That may be the most honest part of the story. After disaster, people don't always know what comes next. They grieve, they argue, they try to begin again. Sam Strauss eventually opened a small temporary store on Center Street, before eventually rebuilding a brick building in the same location on Front Street. Others never recovered at all. One saloon owner had only been in business a month when the fire destroyed everything he had. He had no insurance. Still, he tried again, opening another saloon inside Granger Hall. But according to local memory, the town was dead and there was no business. Trade had drifted elsewhere. Money was scarce. Hope was running thin. The strain overtook him. He reportedly lost his mind and took his own life by drinking coal oil. An inquest was held in Granger Hall. And in one of those cold details history sometimes leaves behind, townsmen supposedly delayed the verdict long enough to finish his remaining liquor stock. When the estate was counted, The man had left behind one watch. Then came another blow. In 1894, the Farmer's Hotel and neighboring Mrs. Martin's boarding house burned. The Farmer's Hotel was one of Turlock's gathering places. Rooms upstairs, saloon below. And as flames consumed the building, one of Turlock's strangest stories was born. According to local accounts, the drinkers simply picked up the bar and carried it outside into the street. While the hotel burned, drinks continued outdoors. It almost sounds impossible, but it tells you everything about frontier-era Turlock. Disaster on one side of the street, whiskey on the other. The late 1890s were hard years. Burned lots remained empty. Farmers often did business in Modesto or Stockton. Even after 1900, visitors described Turlock as a sorry sight. Cheap shacks, muddy streets, loose board sidewalks. For a time, the town seemed stalled, nearly finished. Then, after 1902, new settlers began arriving in larger numbers. Early Swedish and Portuguese families. They farmed the land, built homes, opened businesses. Where others saw failure, they saw opportunity. And slowly, Turlock began again. Today, it's easy to drive through town and never imagine what happened here. But beneath modern Turlock lies a place that once lost almost everything. Twice. Some lost fortunes. Some lost hope. Others rebuilt. And in many ways, the Turlock we know today was born not in prosperity, but in ashes. I've been into mystery since I was a kid, so I'm always glad to meet people wired the same way. My friend Mark hosts Still Unexplained, a podcast that dives into quick-hit mysteries and stories that still leave people wondering. And tonight, he's sharing one of his own.
It was December of 1991. I was 20 years old, broke, and willing to take just about any job that would have me. What I found was a pest control company out of Merced. Spraying for bugs, crawling under houses, pulling tarps over rooftops in July heat. Not glamorous work, but work. They paired me with a guy I'll call Kerry. We spend every workday together in a truck rolling across the Central Valley, knocking on doors, squeezing under floorboards. And you spend enough hours with someone in a cabin, you either end up hating that person or you actually start to talk. And we talked. A few weeks in, he told me something that stopped me cold. He said his younger brother had been kidnapped as a little boy, 7 years old, snatched and held for 7 years. And then his brother escaped. And not only escaped, but rescued another child in the process. His brother came home and became a national news story. A hero. There was even a television movie made about him. He said his brother had died in a motorcycle crash about 2 years prior. He was gone by then, and Carrie was dealing with a loss in a way a lot of men do, quietly and sideways. I remember sitting there in the truck not knowing what to say. I mean, what do you say to something like that? He didn't want me to say much. He just wanted to say it. I tried to offer what I could without prying, because I could tell the grief was real and layered and complicated. Mixed emotions, he said. There was something in his eyes when he talked about his brother that I still think about. Outside of those heavy moments, though, Kerry was easy to be around. He was well-liked at work, genuinely popular. He had a talent for drawing cartoon-style art, and those drawings were everywhere in the office. Pinned to walls, taped to desks. People kept them. He had a following in a small way. He was into Bigfoot, and I mean seriously into it. And look, I've always had an interest in that world, so we could go back and forth on it for the whole drive between jobs. He told me he'd seen one, not as a joke, not as a story. He said he'd seen Bigfoot on one of his solo camping trips, and he believed it completely. He talked about Yosemite like it was a second home. He went up there alone often He invited me more than once, said I should come out, camp with him, see the valley from the inside. I never went. I don't know why exactly. Timing, I guess. I was 20 years old. There were other things happening. I wish I could say something in me hesitated, that some instinct kicked in, but that would be a lie. The truth is I was just busy. He told me once that he was a nudist, that he liked to sunbathe in remote areas of the park. He seemed a little embarrassed saying it, which surprised me, because in most ways he carried himself with quiet confidence. He said he liked encountering German tourists up there, because they were relaxed about the human body, and it made him feel less self-conscious. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. He seemed shy around women at work, a little awkward, a little withdrawn. But women were drawn to him anyway. I saw it happen more than once. Someone flirting with him and he'd go a little pink, kind of deflect. Normal stuff, nothing alarming. He seemed like a guy with a regular life, regular feelings, regular problems. A guy you'd trust with your keys. But when summer ended, I gave my notice. Pest control was not for me. I shook hands, said my goodbyes, and drove back to my real life, knowing I'd probably never see any of them again. And I didn't. And then 8 years passed. 1999. A friend calls me and asks me how I'm feeling about my old coworker. I'd seen something on the news, something about a series of murders up in Yosemite. 4 women. A man who worked at a motel. An arrest. And then my friend said the name, and something in my brain just stopped. Not a slow realization, a full stop. The kind where the world goes quiet for a second and you replay everything at once. Cary Stayner. That was his name. Cary Stayner. The man in the truck. The one who drew the cartoons. The one who talked about his brother with real grief. The one who invited me camping. The one who seemed shy and gentle and ordinary. He had murdered 4 women in and around the Yosemite National Park in 1999. He would later confess to it without much hesitation. The emotions that hit me were like nothing I can fully describe even now. Shock, obviously. Extreme grief for the victims, absolutely. But there was something else underneath it. A kind of self-interrogation that went on for a long time. How did I not know? What did I miss? Was I that naive? That blind? That a man capable of that kind of violence was sitting 3 feet from me every day and I felt nothing? I talked to everyone who would listen. I needed people to tell me I wasn't stupid or oblivious. And eventually, after enough reading and enough time, I accepted something that I think is more disturbing than the idea that I missed something. I didn't miss anything. There was nothing to see. These are people who've spent their entire lives learning to appear as human as the rest of us. Their parents don't know. Their spouses don't know. The people who love them and sleep next to them and share meals with them don't know. So a 20-year-old summer hire in a pest control truck was never going to know. And that's what makes this so terrifying. Not that evil is hidden in dark corners and back alleys, but that it rides around in a work truck with you. That it makes you laugh. That it tells you about its dead brother with real tears in his eyes. That it draws cartoons and puts them on people's desks and gets invited to Christmas parties. Cary Stayner was convicted of the Yosemite murders and sentenced to death. He's still alive on death row in California. His brother Stephen, who survived his own kidnapping and became a national hero, died in that motorcycle crash in 1989, never knowing what his older brother would become. I never felt threatened. I never felt nervous. I never had a single moment where something felt wrong. And that's the part that I'll never fully shake.
If you enjoyed tonight's second segment, go subscribe to Still Unexplained, a great podcast for anyone who grew up fascinated by mysteries the way I did. Thanks for listening to Turlock Unburied. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys the darker side of local history. If you have a story, or even a secondhand one, you'd like to share, you can reach out at stories@turlockunburied.com or by visiting turlockunburied.com. For additional information, photos, and original sources related to tonight's stories, visit turlockunburied.com. Until next time, remember, some stories don't stay buried. Music and sound effects used in this episode were sourced from freesound.org and are licensed under Creative Commons Attribution. Historical research for this episode was drawn from contemporary newspaper accounts and public records. Full source details and archival materials are available at turlockunburied.com. Thanks for listening.